We're into a very important conversation with some remarkable thought leaders. And I've asked this quartet to divide in two parts, so two duets, and address a pretty complex topic, but no one would know better than they, and no one could do it more completely in 20 minutes each. So we're going to start with Lynn Tuttle and David Dick, Young Audiences Arts for Learning Executive Director, David, and Lynn Tuttle, the Director of Public Policy Research and Professional Development for NAFME, our wonderful partner. Young Audience is also a critical partner of the NAMM Foundation and has presented the Nonprofit Management Institute, helping nonprofit music service organizations grow stronger and more effective in their work. So you are going to give us a remarkable flyover, the two of you, answering the question, what is the future of music education? Who's going first?
Well, actually, we're tag teaming, so we're going together. So
even better. I'm going to get out of the way. There you go.
Thanks, Claire. So this is a fabulous comic that David found to start us off. Right, that idea of we're just making this up as we go along, because that's pretty much what public education is doing at this moment in time in response to COVID-19. Should we go to the next slide? So we wanted to start with some of the challenges and considerations as we think about going back to public education, going back to school in the fall, and that idea that you're always going to sort of plan for the worst and hope for the best. So to begin with, as Robin spoke to in terms of the Iowa plan and Mark spoke to a bit in terms of Pennsylvania, there are multiple possibilities for school openings in the fall, and almost every state guidance that we're seeing is asking districts to consider those three options: back in person, fully online, or some hybrid of the two. And the hybrid of the two often includes the need to social distance students, so not all students will be back on the campus on the same day.
And to that also, for us on the call today, who we work in that area of teaching artists, people who come into the school to provide instrumental lessons, even parents, that there's a strong likelihood that these people are not going to be allowed in the building, right? And that could be for a while here. But again, this idea that we're really clamping down for the for the safety of children and the faculty that's there. And as Lynn said, not making this along, but there's CDC advice, there's state advice, there's district advice, there's county advice. And at the end of the day, it does have to be the best decision made locally for those students. So there's a lot there that's unknown.
And connected to that, as David said, sort of those safety and health concerns, as we think about social distancing and we think about not all students allowed back at the same time, we also need to think about what social distancing or physical distancing might mean in the classroom. And for those of us who love our large ensembles, and no one loves them more than I do, my guess is you're not going to, in most schools in most parts of the country, you will not see large ensembles convene again this fall. Potentially outdoors, but certainly not inside the buildings. It's not going to be safe. And so there are implications then in terms of how we're going to be offering music and when and how we'll be making music.
And even if we look inside a school, we think about outside and the role of community-based organizations, taking lessons, garage bands, Molded libraries play in a lot of this work. I think it's going to be difficult to think about a in-school day that's restricted, then all of a sudden out of school time that's unrestricted. So there's still going to be difficulties there. Now, are these all things that can be worked around and thought about creatively? Yes, we're going to get to that, but there could be that possibility.
And as Mark alluded to in the earlier session, and Mary and Chris earlier on, even than that, there are going to be school district, state, and budgetary concerns. So depending on what state you're living in, the tax revenue has decreased anywhere from 5% in the more fortunate states up to 20%. And so how are states going to be responding to that? They've got to start their fiscal year come July 1. For many states, they have to pass prior to July 1 a balanced budget. Constitutionally, they must balance that budget before the start of the next fiscal year. And since the feds aren't moving yet in terms of additional stimulus dollars, that might mean cuts, obviously, to education. Education's normally between 40 and 55% of any given state's budget. So those are all the things, those pressures. And yeah, there are some moments of positivity is Mark shared in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania passed a budget where they held education funding constant from last year into this coming school year. So that's excellent.
And lastly, as we know, many successful music programs, it's not just the tax levy money. It's the money from foundations, it's the money from parents, it's from music booster programs. And right now, even though there are some great provisions in the CARES Act to support individual and corporate funding, people are feeling a little insecure right now. They're not sure what to do, right? You know, stock markets, equity markets themselves, they're irrational. Right, we're not quite sure where those things are moving, but a lot of pieces in place coming out of what we thought was normal. We're coming into the new normal.
Yep.
Next slide, please.
So when we think about this, and we think about sort of standards-based music instruction, oftentimes our default as music educators would be for the P, the performing artistic process of the National Core Art Standards. Next slide.
And this may be a time to think about the other three artistic processes, which is creating, responding, and connecting. So with that, this may be the time to really think about what does composition look like? What is responding to actual work? What does critique look like? What are the conversations? How do we connect to our own musicianship? And these may be the portals that we need to use to get to performing. But I would also say there's an opportunity here right now that rather than creating performers, how do we create musicians instead, right? Mm-hmm. And with that, how do we actually use all these different artistic processes to think about maybe a rebuild and what that experience looks like? So that we're going to get to the positive stuff now. So with that, you know, we talked earlier about people not being allowed in the building, but I wouldn't give up on that quite yet. And I think there's going to be room for people who are providing essential services to a school building. And what we've got to think about collectively is how do we articulate our work as essential? The essential in terms of the connection to students with special needs, the essential aspect that many times, you know, that work through social emotional learning integration, for that teaching artist, the essential role that they're not just there providing some enrichment experience, but they are actually co-teaching. That the essential piece here that we know something in our virtual room here about students that many other people do not know about.
And connected to that, reminding ourselves, it seems quite simple, right? But our job is to teach students through music, not the teaching of music. It's not whether or not we're reaching a grade 4 or 5 large ensemble piece that we're taking to festival. It's about all of those things that working on that music mean and give to students. So how can we do that, particularly in a virtual setting, if that's where we need to be connecting with our students in the coming school year? And a reminder of the power of music to connect and to help students with their social and emotional well-being.
And another piece here is there's an incredible amount that NAMM members who are right now trying to run their businesses and what they are learning about that connection to community that I think school systems are also going to need to know about. So what is the expertise that we collectively bring to the table? And I think sometimes earlier Mary was talking about tables. Sometimes we actually have to build our own table to make these things happen. But there are incredible resources that you all have just in terms of working this through. And for many, working this through in the summer, where it's really in advance of schools coming back in the fall of what that's going to look like.
And what helps us move beyond our sort of traditional lens or way of thinking about music in schools is just being about large ensembles. As Dr. Spradley said at the very beginning, how do we include more students? How do we think differently? This is a real opportunity, potentially over the summer, as we think about hybrid learning, virtual learning, small group chamber learning, in person. Are we going to be able to connect with other students in a meaningful way? Can we invite more students into what we do in music, because it is more than just the traditional ensembles? And what might we want to keep and hold on to that as we move forward past the era of COVID-19?
And the virtual learning piece is not going away. When I was teaching, one of the frustrations we always had was, how do we connect younger students to older students, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine now on these online systems of actually creating these mentorship programs. Boy, if a 5th grader can identify with an 11th grader that music is still part of their life, imagine how that rolls out. Imagine what that looks like, you know, after school.
Mhm.
The other interesting piece is there are many students who are required to have community service projects, and they are going to have to also look very different. Could that mentoring be part of it, right? But also as a field where we always talk about how do we create more opportunities, not just to make music, but to talk about music, to create music, to connect that. There's some important tools, and someone said earlier, many music and arts teachers have been the innovators of the last 3 months of how to use these online tools,
Absolutely.
how to create community, because very often our work requires community. So with that, we really kind of came away with some takeaways, and with that on the next slide, what we're calling the 1+1 3, and this is our lightning round. So indispensable for learning. I just think this is time right now, time to get out of our silos. Right? Time to really talk about the role that music teachers have, that often we teach students for multiple years. We teach their siblings. Many communities we teach their parents, but there's a resource here to bring to the table.
Similarly, reminding ourselves that we are central to the social emotional well-being of the students that we teach, and to remind our administrators of that is who we are and what we do as music educators. As David said earlier, this is a time to be better partners as music educators with our industry and music merchants, better partners from industry back to education. It's time for us to work together. And I love this opportunity for us to really think about student-created work, right? Small ensemble, chamber music, all of these opportunities for us to maybe rethink what the canon is and invite students into that meaning making and music composing as well.
And just lastly, I think there's an opportunity right now as a takeaway to start really thinking about lifelong learning. Think of the number of students who have incredible proficiency on an instrument, especially when they graduate high school, and they may never pick it up again. We can build online intergenerational programs. We can build online now with everyone on this call an opportunity to share that work. Imagine we layer into that things that we've written, how we create that. So we've got to move forward of this thinking positively. There's no other way to do it. But also we have to anticipate what that is. I think our challenge moving forward is we're going to hear a lot of statements that go, yes, but. I think Leo said earlier, no one's going to argue that this work is not important, but time, but money, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We need to tune those arguments into yes and, right? Absolutely, and these are the things that we can do. And I think if we do it right, our music teachers in schools and systems to start to become the leaders of what
Yes.
this looks like in a new place, where I think at the end, we all end up with a hybrid system that allows us not just to be educated in a building, but to create that education throughout the rest of the day and throughout the summer. So Mary, thank you for the opportunity. I think we did pretty good there.
You did awesome. You've got one final thought though. I want to be sure to talk about your final thought. Who would like to talk about that final thought?
It's all about the plan. We've got to be planning, we've got to be active, we've got to be thinking forward, we've got to be thinking creatively, and begin that work now. Yeah. Our students depend on us to do that work now.
And so much
it's interesting, Lynn, it's rehearsal, right?
Oh yeah.
How you step into a rehearsal and you work through that and you deal with the unanticipated, you look for the unanticipated, right? So it's a great point.
Yeah, and the arc of this summit, as we're approaching, the sort of the last session, you are the part of the last session as we approach the end, was to really, create sort of a composition in a way, a journey through the summit that would not all of it would be relevant, every piece. But maybe along the way, someone found the information or the tool or the story that's going to say, I'm going to step into the breach, right? I'm going to step forward and say, I know things are chaotic. I'm going to be part of a planning team. Yep. I'm going to be willing to learn as part of that planning team to park all my expectations or some of my expectations about what it will look like to be a service to students and to the whole recreation. So my question to you to end your segment is, and this is a time-specific question. You've given us a lot of ideas. What can a music education advocate, be it a teacher or a NAMM member, do in the next week? Make sure music education has a place as schools are being reconfigured for the fall. What is, if maybe it's one thing to, besides completing your tasks of writing a member of Congress and your governor,
Right.
sending
That's
your,
first.
right? Well, what would be, from both of your perspectives, in a week?
This
I'll
is,
start, and Lynn's
oh,
always great with the last word. I
all
think in
right.
the last week, Mary, what's already happening, right? I think with that, it's time to not think about teaching music first, but teaching students. And there are a lot of students where this education is critical to their success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that focus of not just the plan, but remembering who those people are, because I think it is about achievement of success and moving forward, is an important piece. And I think, as you said, we've got to be at the table, and we've got to find where that mechanism is. But I think a student-centered conversation is the place to go.
Lynn, final word?
That's awesome. I completely agree with that. And as Dave said, and as you said earlier, and Robin echoed, we need to be at the table. So it's time to go knock on that door. If you haven't been invited yet, go invite yourself and say, how can I help? I want kids to be successful next year. I know music can help with that. And yeah, I get that the scheduling might be a little difficult, but let's think about it. Let's be creative. Let's see what we can do that's best for kids. I'm here to help.
You know, as an advocate, as an advocacy thinker and a doer, I've thought too, what would be my opening line, right? What would be my opening line? Having been that music teacher in a building possibly that was, you know, cranking it out, and people were happy, kids were happy, and all of a sudden, bam, I wasn't going to be able to see students. And, you know, I guess my opening line would be to my principal, you know, I'm really worried for the type of experience our students are going to be having in the fall. And I really want to be part of the planning to make sure you're safe, they're well, they're emotionally whole. I mean, this is the heart, I say music and the heart and soul of learning. Well, you need to express that from yourself to be part of the solution. So, well, you know, my job is to know smart people like you. And I'm so grateful that you're my colleagues and friends. I've learned so much from both of you. So thank you for your great contribution today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
As are we. Thank you, Mary.
Yes, thank you, Mary.
So we're going to turn now to what happens after, you know, a robust experience in K-12. And so many of the students that graduate out of wonderful music education programs follow in the footsteps. We hear this over and over and over. They follow in their footsteps of their wonderful music teachers, and they themselves go on to train to be music teachers or enter into the field of music in some form, performance or academic work or music technology or music business. So we have here, again, two of the best, smartest, brightest minds from that sector. Bill Pelto, who's executive director of the College Music Society, and NAMM enjoys such a vital relationship with College Music Society in the development and implementation of our Gen Next program for college music students and faculty, and Tayloe Harding, who's the Dean of the University of South Carolina. He's interim provost, so we even have it's got a longer resume now, but it was through in Tayloe's role as president of College Music Society that the Gen Next program was actually hatched. So we've got some terrific experts here. And they've both been very involved in kind of reimagining what higher ed can look like for contemporary students today. So I turn to you with the question, what is higher ed in music going to look like in the future? To Tayloe and Bill, I turn it to you. I think Bill's first, right?
That's right. Mary, thanks a lot. It's a real pleasure to be part of this summit today. I want to thank you and Claire and Joe, especially all of you for this ongoing partnership. We at the College Music Society value this partnership with NAMM, and we know this summit has proved inspiring for everyone. I'm going to begin the daunting task of talking about the future of music higher education in 10 minutes or less with some data about college and university music programs. As this first slide shows, we have a total of just under 2,000 colleges and universities that offer music degree programs in the US and Canada, roughly a fifth of which have graduate level degrees, Nearly half are four-year bachelor's granting institutions, and close to a third are community colleges that offer the associate's degree. And the next slide there, Claire. The next slide shows that within these programs, CMS identifies around 30,000 music faculty members. About 3/5 of those are in full-time tenure track positions, with the other 40%, and I would add that that's a growing number, comprising faculty members in part-time or other non-tenure track positions. And the next slide. So with those, if we have 30,000 music faculty members in 2,000 US and Canadian institutions, those people are responsible for the curricula of over 6,000 different degree programs in total. Next slide, Claire. You can well imagine the challenges faced by these music faculty members in the past 3 months. Nearly all were confronted with crisis level changes in the first 3 weeks of March, as entire curricula were converted to online delivery programs. Colleagues very quickly retooled their technology skills, becoming overnight experts on teaching classes, private lessons, practicums, and even ensembles through Zoom, Web Connect, and other platforms. And though they breathed sighs of relief as the spring semester ended, faculties immediately turned to planning for the fall. What's obvious, though, it does bear repeating, is, as you all well know, this wasn't a disaster that hit just one city or region of the country. It has affected every institution, every faculty member, and every degree program. Next slide. Some rough data we've collected from colleagues this month echo other data I've seen in the Chronicle of Higher Education. A clear majority of institutions report plans to use some hybrid model of instruction for the upcoming fall semester, while a quarter of institutions as of early June hadn't yet decided how they would meet students' learning needs. About half are planning revised calendars, including starting early, eliminating breaks, and the like, and a significant number are already planning the spring 2021 semester. Next slide there. As we look ahead, it's remarkable to note that clear majorities of these respondents see the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter protests as having significant effects on our music curricula. Next slide. Certainly, as I'm reading both mainstream media and higher education publications, I see growing evidence that COVID-19 and its effects will inform all walks of life in the near future, whether artistically, medically, politically, or socially. Additionally, national protests and recognition of inequality and systemic racism seem to have reached a tipping point where significant numbers of people throughout all demographics are looking for leaders to effect real change. As music faculties evaluate their programs, I believe that future curricular planning will be affected one way or another by these two current issues. I find it impossible to imagine any discussions about student learning, music making, and curricular revision that are not specifically informed by both the effects and threat of the pandemic and our wake up to the realities of inequalities and racism that pervade our higher education institutions and music organizations. Final slide. I would offer that those changes will likely be profound and beneficial for all. And the good news is that partnerships with the music products industry will undoubtedly lead to the innovations we need. We in higher education will look to our friends in the music industry to help us as we develop new pedagogies that will address health and societal concerns faced by our students. I hope that you, as leaders in the music industry, will help ensure that the future of music includes such innovations. What we need is a new universal design for our music making, not a one-size-fits-all solution, but multiple solutions, all of which keep safety and equity as prime concerns, proclaiming that Black musicians' lives matter and that public health must be a component of our collective musical community. And now I will turn this over to my great colleague, Tayloe Harding.
Thank you, Bill. Bill ends in a good place with respect to where I would like to begin. I think the future of music in higher ed is really about greater distinctiveness, the necessity of greater distinctiveness, and the necessity of greater transparency. All of this being amplified by the pandemic, not so much displaced by it. The condition of music in higher ed before the pandemic began is in a state of flux, in a state of transition, echoed with society and music's role in society. And that has been advanced in ways we could not predict by the pandemic, but nonetheless, things we have to deal with that Bill mentioned beautifully at all of the institutions of higher ed where music is taught and where it plays a role in the musical life of a community. Future of music in higher ed is linked to this evolving societal demand for professional musicians, like we've always been, musical skills for amateurs, which we've been reasonably good at, but we need to get increasingly better at through our partnerships with NAMM members, but with others, and creating opportunities for communities and populations to engage in music listening and music making. Music schools in higher ed have been doing this since they've existed, providing musical experiences in the community for people to enjoy music from using their ears, to enjoy music from using their hands and their wind and their heads. And the music unit of the future needs to continue to do that, invest in what it means to be a musical partner in a community and not just an educational organization. This music is not for music's sake alone, it's for society's sake. And with those two particular thoughts in mind, themes, distinctiveness and transparency. Claire, if you can go to the next slide, we'll just jump in right in there. I want to say a word, if I can, about distinctiveness. Music and higher ed have to be distinctive from one another. During the 20th century, when higher ed was sort of getting its sea legs and it only existed in isolated places around the country, a very small part of the American population sought higher ed. That all changed with the Second World War and the creation of what I think is the most important piece of legislation in the history of the United States, which was the GI Bill. It changed everything. It created a new economy. It built the lives of all members of the boomer class like myself and all of our children and grandchildren, and higher ed was one of the reasons. But in those years right after the GI Bill, when music programs and all sorts of disciplines were emerging in higher ed as the preparation for career and citizenship for Americans, they always sought to be more like one another, to model the better one down the road or up the street or in the next state, to be more like that one. Well, that worked beautifully, but now when Mary asked a question about what's music and higher ed going to look like, in the 21st century, schools are going to have to distinguish themselves from one another for all of the various reasons that Bill just mentioned. Music units need to take their strengths and aspirations, target a market demand, build a vision around those aspirations, and then make sure that they're realizing it in what they do, who they hire, who they impact. And that impact is not just the students that they attract as an educational institution, but also all the people they impact in the way of performing experiences or amateur music making. So I list a couple of bullets there that I think are important, that I would want NAMM members and others to know about what I think is important regarding distinctiveness of music units in the future in higher education. We have to be distinctive because potential students and parents are demanding it. They want something that distinguishes what they're going to do, what their children will study from somewhere else. It's not good enough to be just as good as another school at creating a good violinist. We have to find a different way to create a violinist for a different nature, a different career, a different life desire. And the way units will do that is the reason parents and students will choose to come to an institution like that. We have to be better able to respond to our community's needs in music, and we can only do that by being distinctive and being diverse, understanding that this community has this kinds of musical needs, this community might have another. I believe firmly that those music units that do the best on their campuses and have the greatest impact in their missions are ones that can lead on their campus with respect to the various academic priorities on a campus. If we're distinctive, we're finding a way to be nimble and reactive and proactive to institutional priorities in a way that other disciplines on campuses cannot be. We have done this at Carolina to great success. And I'm very proud and totally bought into the idea that the nimble and alert music unit is the one of the future with respect to maximum impact. And then philanthropy absolutely requires distinctiveness now. Philanthropy being really the only true future new revenue source for music units in higher ed, and new revenue sources are, of course, in every aspect of business and in life, incredibly important. Let's go on to the next slide and I'll get into transparency. Music units have to be more transparent in the future with their stakeholders. If you think about what that means, and the implications are that perhaps in the past we weren't transparent, that's not what I'm saying. There's a different type of transparency and a different requirement now. We have been a place that largely helped students that came in at 17 years old with a particular life goal in music study a curriculum that helped them meet that goal. We haven't been good in music at developing curricula that might help them change their goal or decide at the age of 20 or 21 they want to do something else and they're locked into a curriculum that doesn't really help them do anything else. We can help them, and I've skipped ahead to the third bullet there, we can help them with transparency about what it means to earn that degree and what other degree might be better if they're changing their mind or their musical interests evolve as they emerge from adolescence. That is what it gets studied, but it's also how students decide what to choose. Transparency is other incredibly important nowadays because of the cost of higher ed, and the costs of higher ed have been among the 3 or 4 most important things that we've been thinking about in the COVID crisis planning. Do we change pricing? How will pricing work in the future? What are we going to do with students that want to take a gap year because they don't want to study more online than normal? I mean, all of these things have factored into the notion of being transparent about cost. The gainful employment regulations at the Department of Education. Luckily, we don't have them in place yet, but there may be some time in the future when we do. Music units have got to be really good at telling families of undergraduates, this is what you can expect to earn either initially or down the road if you take this particular degree and choose this particular career path, and make those things as clear as we can. Those are the ideas around transparency and why in 21st century America they're so important for higher education and music. I've done with my little bit of the presentation here, and because I started right off with content from Bill, I didn't have a chance also to thank Mary and Claire and Joe and Sharon and Eric and Jessica and everybody else at NAMM who are amazing colleagues and who have helped me build a whole aspect of my life and my family's life that I would never have imagined otherwise. My roots with Mary go back many, many years, long before NAMM, and the idea that we would be sitting here doing this together in 2020 is really quite an extraordinary thing. And Mary, NAMM, I'm deeply grateful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tayloe. And thank you, Bill. You know, what was fun was Tayloe, you were talking and Bill was like so animated and agreeing, and Bill was talking and Tayloe was so animated and agreeing. You know, so again, my job is just to find the wonderful, brilliant people that understand these subjects and that share it so well. Wow, what a crossroads of challenges and opportunities, right? Seems like we're all at crossroads these days. I have to ask you both a question. I promised everyone I'd make these a little bit softball, but I'm not sure for you two guys. I might. But it is kind of a softball question, but it's, you know, so let's look at the bright side, right? Let's look at the bright side. This is a very disruptive and transitional period. It's extraordinarily disruptive. How is it accelerating the changes you have in mind for student learning in higher ed? Will it accelerate the changes you have in mind? Who will move forward and who's at liability for not embracing these next steps? Who needs time to think, therefore who wants to go first?
I'll jump in, sure. I think I'm an optimist. I think this is an opportunity. There are some real struggles that we have to attend to. I thought the last part of your question was going to be about who might fall through the cracks.
Well, that's,
I think
part
that's,
of it.
yeah. And I think we need to be very, very aware that not all of our students have the technology and resources that automatically apply to this new method of delivery of content and information and skill building. So that's a real concern. But given what I've seen of colleagues all over the country as they're reporting in about the things they're doing to retool and to think about new ways of generating learning platforms, I have great confidence that this could be, in fact, the tipping point that will allow us to move more quickly and nimbly.
Yeah, I would agree, Mary, with the concept of being able to be more reactive and more sensitive to the needs of a diverse society once we're through and on the other side of the COVID crisis, as a result of what it made us think to do and how we adapted to doing it. And I appreciate Bill's comments there. My approach in just a minute or two to answer this question has really more to do about the role of the music unit in society and how critical it is that music faculty and music learners be ones that are constantly aware of the impact they can have and should have, and hopefully will have a calling to have, and certainly develop the skill to have on everyone that they will impact in their community. I think the COVID crisis does indeed accelerate that, because I think it accelerates society's demand for something that makes them feel good and makes them reflect upon those aspects of their life that either they love or want to love. We know, everyone on this call knows, that music is at the top of the list of the things that do that. We've built our entire K through 12 music system on that, as our great colleagues before us talked about, and has been, we've shed light on that all day with all the presenters. So, and I wouldn't be in music and higher ed myself if I didn't believe that our units, where we have, which is the crossroads of great music learning and filling the need of society for music, higher ed is where those two things meet. And we have an extraordinary responsibility to meet it now and in a uncertain future.
Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. I wish we were closer and we could carry on in some wonderful academic bar somewhere. I know we could find one, and
Well, that could happen, Mary.
I know, or a cup of tea. So, but thank you both so very, very much, and we'll see you online again. But thank
Great.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
Mary.
you.